Welcome, beautiful Sigma ladies. People don't see themselves as clearly as they think. They only see the mask that feels safest to wear. That single truth has shattered entire relationships, destroyed trust, and built myths around people who never even tried to be mysterious. Psychology has shown that humans are the worst judges of their own behavior. Studies reveal that we consistently overestimate our strengths while underestimating the impact of our weaknesses. And when it comes to Sigma females, that blind spot is magnified. They pride themselves on being self-aware, independent, and untouchable, yet even they carry invisible patterns they don't recognize. Ironically, while they're busy dissecting everyone else with surgical precision, they sometimes fail to notice the quiet contradictions pulsing within themselves. It's almost funny, like a detective who can solve every crime in the city but doesn't realize their own house is on fire. But behind that humor lies something darker. These unseen truths shape how Sigma females are perceived, how they affect others, and how they unknowingly command power they don't even think they're using. This is the part most Sigma females fail to see about themselves, and it's far more unsettling than they'd ever admit. Number 1. They think they're escaping the game, but they're redefining it. They like to believe they've escaped the system, that by refusing to play social games or follow the rules, they've stepped outside the hierarchy altogether. But the truth is far more unsettling. By not playing, they don't vanish from the board. They become the piece that everyone else has to calculate around. Sigma females often fail to see that their withdrawal, their silence, and their refusal to perform the rituals of approval don't make them irrelevant. It makes them unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. Every social environment thrives on predictability. People know how the loud ones will act, how the charming ones will talk, how the desperate ones will seek validation. The Sigma female breaks that pattern. She doesn't flatter the boss. She doesn't laugh at the jokes just because everyone else does. She doesn't give hints about what she wants or where she stands. Suddenly, her presence forces others to adjust, to overthink, to second-guess themselves. They project motives onto her that she never voiced. They imagine strategies she never even considered. By not playing, she makes everyone else paranoid about what game she might actually be playing. This is where the irony lies. While she thinks she's above the system, she's actually rewriting its rules without lifting a finger. The hierarchy can't fully absorb her because she won't submit to it. But it also can't ignore her because her absence of reaction shifts the balance. People start to compete harder for her attention because she doesn't give it freely. They speculate about her loyalties because she never declares them. Even her refusal to participate becomes a kind of participation. It creates ripple effects that pull others into her orbit. It's not rebellion in the loud, dramatic sense. It's more like quiet disruption, the kind that leaves a mark precisely because it doesn't announce itself. Sigma females don't escape the game at all. They redefine it, sometimes without realizing the control they're exercising. And in that gap, between what they think they're doing and the effect they actually have, lies their unacknowledged influence. It's not about dominance or submission. It's about becoming the one variable nobody else can fully predict, and therefore the one everyone is forced to respect. Number 2. They fail to notice how deeply they crave recognition on their terms. Sigma females carry themselves as though recognition is the last thing they care about. They insist they don't need applause, validation, or anyone else's approval. And on the surface, it looks true. They don't chase compliments. They don't fish for attention. They don't adjust their behavior to win the crowd. But underneath that armor of detachment lies a quiet contradiction they rarely admit to themselves. They do crave recognition, just not the cheap, noisy kind everyone else is addicted to. For them, recognition must come on their terms. They don't want empty praise shouted in public. They want a sharp mind to notice the nuance in their actions. They don't need a flood of likes on social media. They want one person who actually understands why they made the choices they did. It's not about being adored by the many. It's about being seen clearly by the few. That's what gnaws at them more than they'll ever confess. The truth is, Their independence isn't completely free of ego. When they withdraw, part of them wants the world to notice that withdrawal. When they refuse to bend to expectations, they hope someone recognizes the strength it takes to stand firm. They don't want attention for existing. They want acknowledgement for being different, for being uncompromising, for holding a line most others would fold on. It's not recognition in the shallow sense, it's respect, even reverence for qualities they've fought hard to maintain. The danger is that because they won't openly ask for this, they're often left unsatisfied. People mistake their silence for indifference when in reality, they're paying close attention to who notices the little details. They may never voice it, but deep down, they're quietly grading people on their ability to see past the mask. And when no one measures up, the Sigma female withdraws even further, convincing herself recognition doesn't matter, while secretly resenting that it wasn't given. So while they build their lives around the idea of self-sufficiency, they remain human in this one hidden way. The contradiction is striking. They reject validation, yet they hunger for recognition, not from everyone, not loudly, but from the right people in the right way on their own terms. That hunger never really disappears. Number 3, their friendships often feel transactional to others. Sigma females are loyal, but their loyalty comes with strict boundaries. They don't pour themselves into every relationship equally, and they don't feel obligated to invest in people who don't add value, emotionally, intellectually, or strategically. To them, this is simply efficiency. To everyone else, it can feel cold, calculating, or transactional. Friends notice that some get deep attention while others get almost none, and they can't help but wonder if the bond exists because of genuine connection, or because the Sigma female sees some unspoken benefit in keeping it alive. This selective investment isn't a conscious attempt to manipulate, it's more instinctual, a survival strategy perfected over years of navigating social chaos. They've learned that not everyone deserves time, energy, or trust. They measure effort against payoff, not in a material sense, but in emotional currency. That means a friendship that feels effortless to the Sigma female can feel unbalanced or even exploitative to the other person. The tricky part is that this perception is often mistaken for coldness or arrogance. The Sigma female doesn't hand out loyalty freely, but she also doesn't demand proof of worthiness in words. Her judgment is quiet, internal, and rarely explained. Those on the outside only see the filtered version. She engages deeply with some, barely acknowledges others, and always remains enigmatic. That ambiguity fuels suspicion. People interpret her discretion as detachment or calculation, when it's actually a refined sense of where her energy belongs. In essence, her friendships aren't transactional in the conventional manipulative sense. They're conditional in a principled, almost invisible way. Loyalty is earned, and investment is measured. But because she rarely clarifies her criteria, others struggle to understand her motives, often misreading her selectiveness as opportunism. This gap between intention and perception is a blind spot even Sigma females fail to fully grasp. Their social strategy is effective and protective, yet it unintentionally fosters doubt about the authenticity of the very bonds they value most. It's a paradox. They seek meaningful connections, yet the way they protect themselves can make those connections feel conditional, leaving others unsure whether they're loved or merely tolerated. Number 4, they accidentally humiliate people by needing nothing. Sigma females have a way of operating that feels effortless to them, but disorienting to others. Most relationships run on a simple, unspoken economy. People give validation, comfort, and reassurance, and they expect some return. It's how emotional balance is maintained. Sigma females, however, rarely play by these invisible rules. They don't seek approval, they don't fish for compliments, and they don't rely on others to fill emotional gaps. They simply exist on their own terms. The unintended effect of this independence is powerful, and sometimes painful for those around them. People who are used to reciprocity in relationships start to feel off balance. When they try to offer support, advice, or validation, it can seem like it falls into a void. The Sigma female doesn't react with gratitude or dependency the way most people expect. She doesn't need reassurance, she doesn't need flattery, and she doesn't feel the urge to explain or justify herself. For someone trying to connect, this can feel like rejection, or worse, like their efforts are meaningless. It's not deliberate. Sigma females don't set out to make others feel unimportant, but by refusing to participate in the emotional exchange most people unconsciously rely on, they create a subtle humiliation. People start questioning themselves. Am I overstepping? Am I not enough? They might even feel insecure or inadequate, simply because the Sigma female's independence highlights the extent to which they depend on validation in their own lives. This dynamic makes Sigma females both fascinating and intimidating. Their self-sufficiency is admirable, but it carries consequences that are invisible to them. They disrupt the rhythm of normal social interaction without trying to, and in doing so, they unintentionally place others in a position of self-doubt. The very strength that protects them also unsettles everyone else, and the Sigma female often remains unaware of the ripple effect her needlessness leaves behind. In essence, needing nothing is a superpower and a social weapon, even if unintentionally. It exposes dependency in others while keeping the Sigma female firmly untouchable, admired, and occasionally feared. Number 5. Their self-containment creates a social power vacuum. Sigma females often operate in a way that seems invisible at first glance. They don't chase attention, compete for status, or perform the small, predictable rituals that most people use to navigate social hierarchies. They simply exist on their own terms, detached, composed, and selective in their engagement. What they rarely realize is the effect this has on the people around them. By refusing to participate in the usual social games, they create a vacuum that others instinctively feel compelled to fill. Humans are uncomfortable with uncertainty. When someone refuses to signal intentions, reveal emotions, or conform to expected roles, it throws others off balance. People start projecting their own assumptions, fears, and desires onto the Sigma female. Every silence becomes a statement. Every non-reaction is interpreted as meaning something. She doesn't guide the narrative, but others feel forced to, which can lead to obsession, speculation, and even hostility. The Sigma female's self-containment becomes a mirror, reflecting everyone else's insecurities and projections back at them, often without her even noticing. This vacuum is a form of unintentional power. By not participating, she dictates the social energy around her without moving a muscle. Others scramble to make sense of her choices, trying to predict her behavior or decode hidden motives. In doing so, they grant her influence that she never asked for. She doesn't need to dominate conversations or assert herself overtly. Her refusal to conform ensures that attention gravitates toward her anyway, even if that attention is mixed with confusion or resentment. The subtlety of this dynamic is what makes it so extraordinary. Most people gain social power by acting, by signaling, or by manipulating. Sigma females gain power by withdrawing, by simply being, and by letting the gaps they leave be filled with the projections of others. They rarely see it themselves, but their composure, independence, and refusal to play the predictable social game make them the axis around which the social energy in any room starts to spin. It's invisible influence at its most potent, and the Sigma female often walks through it oblivious, untouched, and unintentionally in control. Number 6. Their calmness can look like arrogance. Sigma females carry themselves with a level of composure that most people struggle to maintain even in normal circumstances. In chaotic environments, arguments, office politics, social drama, they stay steady, measured, and unflappable. To them, this is simply self-control, a conscious choice to not be swept away by emotion or peer pressure. They see it as clarity. Others see it differently. When everyone around them is flustered, overreacting, or scrambling for attention, the Sigma female's calmness inadvertently casts a spotlight on how out of step everyone else is. People start noticing their own anxiety, impulsiveness, or neediness in contrast. The Sigma female isn't pointing it out, isn't mocking. It's just the effect of her presence. But to the outside observer, her poise can feel like silent judgment. Her stillness becomes a mirror showing everyone else their flaws, which often comes across as arrogance, even if none was intended. The danger of this misperception is that it creates subtle tension in relationships and social settings. People may admire her composure, but simultaneously feel intimidated or resentful. They wonder why she isn't affected by the same pressures or emotions they are. They interpret neutrality as superiority. The Sigma female might notice irritation or envy directed her way, but rarely understands that it's the calm itself that triggers it. Her refusal to break character or be swept into chaos isn't a conscious power move, it's simply how she navigates life, but its effects are profound. In environments where most people react first and think later, her measured behavior becomes an unspoken standard they feel pressured to match. And because she doesn't adjust or apologize for it, she inadvertently sets herself apart, creating distance that feels intentional even when it isn't. In short, calmness becomes misread as arrogance, not because she wants it to, but because her ability to remain composed in chaos exposes the insecurity, impulsiveness, and emotional volatility of those around her. She's simply steady, yet others interpret it as superiority, and she rarely sees just how disruptive that subtle perception can be. Number 7. They hide behind logic to avoid emotional exposure. Sigma females often pride themselves on being rational, level-headed, and grounded in reason. They present decisions, opinions, and interactions as carefully analyzed and logically sound. On the surface, it appears they simply value clarity over chaos. But underneath, this reliance on logic frequently serves a more protective function. It shields them from emotional exposure. By framing responses in cold, precise reasoning, they avoid admitting feelings that might make them seem vulnerable, uncertain, or dependent. This armor is subtle. They don't loudly declare, "I'm protecting myself," but it's embedded in almost every interaction. When faced with conflict, they dissect the situation, present facts, and focus on outcomes rather than expressing frustration, hurt, or doubt. When questioned about intentions or desires, they provide structured explanations instead of opening up emotionally. To them, it's efficiency. To others, it can feel like walls built of steel, leaving no entry point for connection. The weaponization of logic is particularly effective because it turns a human vulnerability, emotion, into an intellectual exercise. They analyze people's behavior, motives, and mistakes with precision, all while keeping their own emotional landscape tightly controlled. This creates a perception of unshakable stability, but it's also a defense mechanism. Emotional honesty requires risk, the risk of being judged, rejected, or misinterpreted. For Sigma females, that risk is often unacceptable, so they default to a mode of reasoning that feels safe, authoritative, and untouchable. Ironically, this approach both protects and isolates them. While logic grants respect and authority, it can also prevent deep emotional intimacy. People may admire their intelligence, but struggle to reach them on a human level. Even close friends or partners may feel that the Sigma female is always just out of reach, operating behind an impenetrable shield of rationality. Ultimately, their preference for logic isn't just a personality trait, it's a carefully maintained barrier. It disguises fear of vulnerability as rationality, turning self-preservation into a skill that looks like mastery. They may see themselves as simply analytical, but in reality their logic is often the mask that keeps them safe from emotional exposure and the very thing that keeps others at a distance. Number 8. They're often guilty of emotional ghosting. Sigma females rarely disappear in dramatic fashion, but they often practice a subtler, more insidious form of withdrawal, emotional ghosting. Unlike the sudden explosive exits that dominate social media narratives, this is a slow fade. They stay physically present, continue attending events, replying to messages, or fulfilling responsibilities. But the emotional connection, the warmth, responsiveness, and vulnerability that sustains relationships gradually diminishes. For the people on the receiving end, it's confusing and destabilizing because the outward signals suggest everything is fine, while the underlying bond quietly erodes. This behavior isn't necessarily intentional or malicious. Sigma females often prioritize self-preservation and emotional autonomy above all else. When a relationship feels draining, mismatched, or simply unworthy of deep investment, they withdraw incrementally rather than confronting the situation directly. The slow fade becomes their way of avoiding conflict, disappointment, or messy emotional exchanges. To them it's practical and discreet. To others it can feel like abandonment disguised as normalcy. The impact is surprisingly powerful. Those on the other side often sense the distance but struggle to articulate it, questioning their own worth or interpreting the lack of engagement as a personal failure. The emotional starvation doesn't leave a sudden hole. It creates a lingering void where expectations are unmet, subtle cues of affection are absent, and connection is systematically minimized. It forces people to fill in the blanks themselves, often imagining reasons or assigning blame, while the Sigma female remains largely untouched by the emotional fallout. What makes this pattern so compelling and so damaging is the combination of presence and absence. She's there, physically and superficially attentive, but emotionally she is elsewhere. It's a quiet dominance, an unspoken assertion of control. She dictates how much of herself is available without ever needing to justify it. While others might see her as distant, cold, or unfeeling, she experiences it simply as self-protection. Yet even as she shields herself, she leaves a mark, shaping perceptions, testing loyalties, and often teaching others the cost of misreading her boundaries. In essence, emotional ghosting for a Sigma female is both subtle and strategic. She doesn't vanish, but the connection fades, leaving others disoriented, hungry for engagement, and fully aware, sometimes too late, of how deeply they relied on her emotional presence. Number 9. Their ability to see through others makes them blind to themselves. Sigma females have an uncanny ability to read people, detecting hidden motives, deciphering subtle cues, and predicting behavior with striking accuracy. They dissect intentions, filter out manipulations, and navigate social dynamics with almost surgical precision. To outsiders, it appears as if they are always 3 steps ahead, analyzing and understanding everyone around them. What they rarely realize is that this skill comes at a cost. The very clarity they have about others blinds them to themselves. They become masters of spotting defense mechanisms, masks, and facades in everyone else, yet their own shields remain invisible to them. They pride themselves on objectivity and insight, assuming their reasoning and detachment are flawless. But the patterns they detect so easily in others, the avoidance of vulnerability, the calculated withdrawals, the subtle manipulations, are often reflected back in their own behavior. The difference is that they perceive these traits externally, while internally they justify them as self-preservation, rationality, or independence. This blind spot affects how they connect with the world. Because they are so attuned to detecting hidden agendas and motives, they rarely question the agendas behind their own emotional choices. Their withdrawals, their selective loyalty, their guardedness, all of it is natural to them, almost invisible. Meanwhile, they can see the same behaviors in friends, partners, or colleagues as deliberate, manipulative, or suspicious. They analyze, judge, and respond with precision, yet they fail to apply the same scrutiny inward. Ironically, this creates a paradox. The Sigma female can navigate the complexities of social interaction better than most, but she remains partially blind to her own influence, vulnerabilities, and contradictions. She knows exactly how others are being perceived and manipulated, but she underestimates how transparent her own defenses and behaviors appear to those paying attention. In essence, her extraordinary skill at seeing through people becomes a mirror with selective reflection. She reads the world with clarity, but misses the reflections that concern herself. Her sharpness with others is unmatched, yet her self-perception lags, leaving her unaware of how much her own patterns shape relationships, provoke reactions, and define the very influence she wields without even realizing it. Number 10. They underplay their influence. Sigma females often move through social spaces believing they're unnoticed, outsiders quietly observing rather than participating. They assume their presence, or lack of it, has little effect, that silence is neutral and disapproval is inconsequential. Yet the reality is entirely different. Even when they say nothing, their absence is felt. Even when they don't assert themselves, their subtle cues, body language, facial expressions, or quiet observation, can shift the energy of an entire room. People instinctively respond to them, consciously or unconsciously adjusting behavior, opinions, and interactions based on what they perceive from the Sigma female. Her influence is rarely loud or deliberate. She doesn't issue commands, flaunt authority, or demand attention. Instead, it's woven into the gaps she leaves, the reactions she withholds, and the selective engagement she permits. A room may feel different simply because she chose not to speak, because she remained calm while others panicked, or because she didn't validate certain social norms. Her silence creates tension, curiosity, or unease, forcing people to react, speculate, or adapt, all without her lifting a finger. This understated impact is something she often fails to notice. She measures influence in visible markers, followers, recognition, or accolades, but her real power is in the subtle currents she creates. By refusing to participate in expected ways, she redirects attention, subtly shapes decisions, and rearranges hierarchies without appearing to. Her calm detachment, selective engagement, and quiet judgments are more disruptive and more potent than anything overt action could achieve. In essence, Sigma females are social forces disguised as observers. They believe they're invisible, yet everything around them shifts in response to their presence, absence, or disapproval. Their influence isn't announced, it's absorbed. And while they may underplay it or fail to recognize it, the world around them bends to their subtle, unacknowledged power, making them far more consequential than they ever give themselves credit for. Number 11. They mistake self-control for self-mastery. Sigma females often pride themselves on their composure, discipline, and ability to remain unshaken in stressful situations. They see restraint as a mark of strength, interpreting their ability to hold back, suppress impulses, or avoid confrontation as mastery over themselves. To them, self-control is evidence that they've risen above emotional turbulence, that they are in command of their inner world and impervious to the chaos that engulfs others. The problem is that restraint doesn't always equal mastery. Often it's fear dressed as strength. Sigma females may avoid emotional engagement not because they have conquered their feelings, but because they're protecting themselves from unpredictability, rejection, or exposure. They sidestep vulnerability, mask discomfort, and suppress reactions, not out of enlightened discipline but out of caution. Their control is reactive, a shield against possible emotional harm rather than a proactive embrace of inner power. This creates a subtle paradox. On the outside, they appear composed, deliberate, and self-sufficient. They rarely lose their cool, rarely overshare, rarely react impulsively. But internally, that same control can be brittle. It's a constant negotiation to avoid situations that might challenge their carefully maintained equilibrium. Their strength is less about mastering themselves and more about avoiding situations that could expose weaknesses. The danger of this misconception is that it can blind them to personal growth. True self-mastery isn't just about restraint. It's about understanding emotions, engaging with them consciously, and transforming them into intentional action. By confusing avoidance with mastery, Sigma females may miss opportunities to confront their fears, explore vulnerability, or push the boundaries of their own limits. In essence, the control they so value is both a tool and a trap. It keeps them safe, maintains their image, and earns respect, but it also conceals the parts of themselves they've yet to confront. Their restraint is a kind of armor, but real strength would require removing it, if only briefly, to face the chaos they've long avoided. The irony is that what looks like mastery from the outside is often just fear in disguise, a careful choreography of avoidance masquerading as absolute control. Number 12. They're masters at creating emotional hunger without realizing it. Sigma females have a remarkable, almost invisible way of shaping the emotional landscape around them, and they often don't even realize it. By never oversharing, by never offering excessive reassurance or validation, they create a sense of scarcity in the connections they maintain. People instinctively crave what isn't freely given, and the Sigma female's restraint amplifies that desire. Those around her are left perpetually reaching, trying to decipher her thoughts, decode her feelings, and earn the small glimpses of attention or approval she occasionally allows. This behavior isn't calculated in the way most would recognize as manipulation. It's simply how they operate. They prioritize their independence and emotional boundaries above all else, believing they're maintaining balance or self-respect. But the effect on others is unmistakable. It generates a subtle, almost addictive pull. People unconsciously invest more time, energy, and thought into her because she doesn't hand herself over freely. The lack of constant emotional feedback becomes a silent lever, shaping behavior and attention without a single word or command. The genius and danger of this dynamic is that it operates below the radar. Sigma females think they're simply being self-contained, valuing privacy and restraint. In reality, their very restraint becomes a tool of influence. By withholding, they set the terms of engagement, and others unconsciously adjust to them. They create tension, curiosity, and even obsession, all without intending to dominate. Their power lies in what they don't give, not what they do. This also explains why many relationships with Sigma females feel intense yet frustrating. People are drawn in by the depth, the mystery, and the glimpses of connection, yet they're never fully satisfied. The emotional hunger she cultivates, accidentally or not, keeps people engaged, attentive, and invested. In short, Sigma females are masters of subtle emotional influence. They mistake their behavior for balance, but in reality, every withheld word, every measured reaction, and every piece of guarded vulnerability quietly exerts dominance. They shape interactions, perceptions, and attachments simply by controlling access to themselves, and the world responds without even realizing why. Sigma females are a paradox the world can't quite decode. They move through life detached yet magnetic, independent yet quietly influential, composed yet unintentionally disruptive. Every choice they make, every silence, every boundary, every measured interaction, ripples outward, shaping perceptions, behaviors, and social dynamics in ways they often don't see. Their strengths, their defenses, and even their blind spots create a landscape where people are drawn in, challenged, and sometimes unsettled, all while the Sigma female herself remains mostly unaware of the power she wields. What's remarkable is how much of this influence is accidental. They don't perform for attention, manipulate for control, or seek recognition, yet their presence or absence changes everything around them. By protecting themselves, they force others to confront their own needs, desires, and insecurities. By withholding, they create longing. By observing, they spark speculation. By staying composed, they unsettle those who can't match their calm. The world reacts to them not because they demand it, but because they refuse to bend to expectation. And yet, even with all this unacknowledged impact, Sigma females are still human. They crave recognition on their own terms, fear vulnerability, and sometimes mistake restraint for mastery. Their brilliance and their blind spots coexist, creating a complexity that fascinates, frustrates, and challenges everyone around them, including themselves. Understanding Sigma females means seeing beyond the surface, recognizing the subtle dominance in their independence, the power in their silence, and the influence in their restraint. It's about realizing that what appears effortless, detached, or private is actually a sophisticated interplay of control, instinct, and human imperfection. They are forces of nature disguised as ordinary people, quietly shaping the world without ever needing permission to do so. If this deep dive into the hidden truths of Sigma females fascinated you, make sure you don't miss what's coming next. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you're always the first to uncover these extraordinary insights. If you found value here, like the video to show your support, comment below with your thoughts or experiences. Let's get the conversation started and share it with friends who need to see this. Every click helps us keep delivering content that's bold, brutally honest, and impossible to ignore. Don't just watch, be part of the journey.